It was a Wednesday morning like any other. I was settling into my workday, still tasting the bitter remnants of my too-hot coffee when my phone buzzed on the corner of my desk. The screen flashed a number I didn't recognize. No caller ID, just a string of digits that felt as anonymous as a stranger's face in a crowded subway. I almost let it ring out, but something in me, maybe that old ingrained sense of responsibility, made me swipe to answer. "Hello, is this Callie Thompson?" The voice on the other end asked, crisp and professional. I hesitated, a strange chill creeping into my chest. "Yes, this is Callie. This is Marcus from Crestview National Bank. We're calling regarding your mortgage balance of $487,000. We've sent several notices, but our records show no response." I felt my pulse spike, my grip on the phone tightening. "I don't have a mortgage," I replied, sharper than I intended. "You must have the wrong person." There was a pause, the kind that stretched too long, like a breath held on a tightrope. "Ma'am, this account is registered under your full name, date of birth, and social security number. It was opened 4 years ago." 4 years. My mind raced, struggling to catch up. 4 years ago, I was just settling into my first real job, saving every penny for my first apartment, not a sprawling house I'd never seen. It made no sense. "I think you have a mistake," I said, my voice lower now, tinged with unease. "I've never owned a house." "I understand this is unexpected," Marcus continued, his tone slipping into a practiced sympathy. "But our records are clear. The loan was secured in your name." I ended the call without another word, my heart thudding in my chest. My mind flicked through the last few years, trying to make sense of this impossible mistake. I thought of my younger brother Jake, his dreams of flipping houses, his endless talks about real estate deals and fixer-uppers. He had always been the risk-taker, the dreamer, the one with a plan for everything. I'd helped him fill out FAFSA forms, co-signed student loans, and even fronted cash for his first car when our parents couldn't. But a mortgage? No, he wouldn't have, or would he? I opened my laptop, the screen glaring back at me as I pulled up my bank's website. The transactions were routine rent groceries, a few too many takeout orders. But then I found it buried deep in my inbox. An email from Crestview National. I had ignored months ago, assuming it was junk. I clicked it open, my stomach twisting as the words swam before my eyes. "Dear Callie Thompson, thank you for your recent inquiry regarding your mortgage account. As the primary borrower, you are responsible for the balance of $487,000. If you have questions regarding your payment schedule or interest rate, please contact us." I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't a scam email. This was real. I spent the next hour tearing through old files, pulling out tax returns, student loan documents, and every scrap of financial paper I had. My heart pounded louder with each piece of paper I flipped through. I found old forms I'd signed, co-signing for Jake's college loans, helping him get his first car, opening joint accounts when he needed a leg up. My signature, my social security number, my name, my life wrapped around his needs. That's when I found it. A copy of a title deed. My name, my date of birth. My signature neatly typed beside a property address I didn't recognize. My mind spiraled back to that summer 4 years ago. Jake had just come back from a real estate conference, his head full of ideas, his eyes shining with ambition. He had pulled me aside at a family barbecue, drunk on cheap beer and dreams, talking about the next big thing. I had smiled, proud of his confidence, his unbreakable optimism. I should have known better. I sank to the floor, surrounded by scattered papers and the distant hum of my refrigerator. My pulse thudded in my ears. My thoughts, a chaotic loop of betrayal and disbelief. Jake had always been the golden child, the one who took risks and somehow always landed on his feet. I had been the reliable one, the one who cleaned up his messes, who stood in the background and clapped while he took the stage. And now, without a word, without even a hint, he had pulled me into his latest scheme. But this was different. This wasn't a minor slip or a petty lie. This was my life, my future, my financial stability on the line. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about a mortgage. It was about trust. It was about family. It was about betrayal. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath as the realization settled over me like a cold, wet blanket. My own brother had forged my name, signed me into $500,000 of debt, and never said a word. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I felt a slow, simmering anger, not the kind that burns bright and fades, but the kind that settles deep, hardening into resolve. I would not let this go. Not this time. I stood, my legs shaky, but my mind clear. If Jake thought I would just roll over and take this, he had forgotten who I really was. I would gather my proof piece by piece, and when the time came, I would make sure he felt every ounce of this betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt a calm, cold certainty I wasn't just going to get even, I was going to get ahead. And this time, I wasn't doing it for anyone else but me. I barely slept that night, my mind tangled in a web of disbelief and rising anger. By morning, the shock had hardened into something sharper, a need for answers. I dug deeper, pulling up every financial document I had, from student loan agreements to old tax forms. My signature, the one I had so freely given for years, felt like a ghost haunting every page. I didn't just find one document, I found dozens. Co-signed car loans, joint credit applications, medical forms, all the tiny, invisible ties that bind you to someone you trust. And there, buried in the stack, was a thick envelope from Crestview National, postmarked nearly 3 years ago. I had tossed it into a drawer without a second glance, assuming it was junk mail or some generic offer. My hands trembled as I pulled the papers free, my pulse a steady drum in my ears. It was the full mortgage packet, pages and pages of tightly printed legal text, all of it neatly wrapped in a thick, crisp cover letter. My name sat in bold letters at the top alongside a property address I had never visited. I forced myself to slow down, reading each line, my mind refusing to believe what my eyes confirmed. This was no mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated act. Jake had used my name, my credit, my trust to secure a nearly $500,000 mortgage. The signature at the bottom of the loan documents was mine, or at least close enough to fool a bank clerk. It was too neat, too confident, lacking the slight wobble in my R and the tight loop in my Y. Someone had either practiced or forged it outright. And as much as I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that maybe I had somehow signed something in a moment of distraction, I knew better. Jake had always been good at convincing people. He could talk his way into anything, a better grade, a free upgrade, a second chance, and apparently he had talked his way into my financial future, locking me into a mountain of debt without my knowledge. I spent the next few hours in a haze, making calls, pulling my credit report, digging into every corner of my financial life. It was worse than I had imagined. Not only had Jake taken out the mortgage, but he had also used my information to secure a second line of credit, pulling cash to cover renovations and upgrades. He had built a life on my back, brick by stolen brick, and I hadn't even noticed. When I finally hit a wall, my eyes burning from hours of screen glare and my throat tight with unshed tears, I called my best friend Zoe. She picked up on the third ring, her voice bright and curious. "Hey, Callie, what's up? You sound out of breath." I hesitated, the words thick in my throat. How do you even start a conversation like this? How do you tell someone you've just discovered the person you trusted most has betrayed you in the most profound way? "Zoe," I managed, my voice trembling. "I think Jake stole my identity." She was silent for a beat, the line crackling with the sound of her breathing. Then, in a voice low and deadly serious, she said, "I'm coming over." When she arrived, I was still on the floor. Papers spread around me like the aftermath of a financial tornado. Zoe took one look at my face, the red rims of my eyes, the scattered documents, and sank down beside me. She pulled me into a tight hug, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold knot in my chest. "Tell me everything," she whispered, and I did. I walked her through every form, every signature, every misstep. I laid out the twisted, tangled mess my brother had made of my life, the debts he had tied to my name, the lies he had spun with my trust as his safety net. When I finished, Zoe leaned back, her dark eyes sharp, her jaw tight. "We're not letting this slide," she said, her voice low and fierce. "He wants to use you like a stepping stone. Fine, let's make sure he drowns in his own lies." Something in her words sparked a fire in me, a tiny ember of the old, fierce Callie I had forgotten existed. I looked around at the scattered papers, the life I had built, the life Jake had tried to steal. And for the first time since that call, I felt something other than despair. I felt ready to fight, ready to take back what was mine. And as I sat there surrounded by the wreckage of Jake's betrayal, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't just about getting even. This was about reclaiming my life piece by piece until there was nothing left of his lies but the ashes of his own arrogance. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. My anger had sharpened into a quiet, focused determination. I wasn't just going to dig myself out of this mess. I was going to make sure Jake felt every ripple of his betrayal. I started by calling Crestview National, this time prepared. I spoke to a woman named Denise, her voice crisp and polite, clearly used to the routine of financial disputes. "Hi, Denise," I said, my tone steady, my heartbeat loud in my ears. "I'd like to request a full account history and all related documents for the mortgage in my name, including, but not limited to, the original loan application closing documents and any credit checks performed at the time." There was a pause, a faint click of a keyboard in the background. I could almost picture her brow furrowed, scrolling through my account. "Of course," she replied, her tone professional, but cautious. "I can send you a copy of the original loan packet. However, to make any formal disputes, you'll need to provide identification and a signed affidavit stating that this account was opened without your consent." "That won't be a problem," I replied, trying to keep the cold edge out of my voice. I didn't want to come across as a victim. I wanted her to know I meant business. After hanging up, I pulled out a fresh legal pad and started drafting a list of every step I needed to take. I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. And that felt like the first real step toward taking back control. File a police report for identity theft. Freeze my credit with all 3 major bureaus. Contact a lawyer who specializes in financial fraud. Gather every piece of evidence I had. Emails, old signatures, tax returns. Confront Jake, but only when I had everything lined up. By the time I finished, the sun had shifted across the sky, casting long shadows through my living room window. I leaned back, stretching the stiffness from my shoulders, and felt a small, fierce spark of pride. This was the part of me I had forgotten, the Callie who didn't back down, who didn't let anyone push her around. That evening, Zoe swung by again, a bottle of wine in one hand and a stack of manila folders in the other. She dropped them on my coffee table with a grin. "Research," she said, dropping onto the couch beside me. "I spent all afternoon digging through public records and mortgage databases. I've got property deeds, tax assessments, and even some old newspaper clippings about the renovations Jake bragged about." I stared at the pile, my heart swelling with gratitude. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered, my throat tight. "Callie, you're my best friend," she shot back, unscrewing the wine bottle with a flourish. "And if there's one thing I hate, it's a snake in the grass Jake picked the wrong person to mess with." We spent the next few hours combing through the documents, piecing together the timeline of Jake's deception. It was worse than I had imagined. Not only had he forged my name on the mortgage, but he had also taken out a second home equity line of credit, pulling nearly $50,000 for upgrades and furniture. He had sunk my name, my future, into his personal real estate empire without a second thought. "He must have thought you'd never find out," Zoe muttered, pouring us each a fresh glass of wine. "Or worse, that you'd just forgive him if you did." I leaned back, the wine warm in my chest, my mind spinning with 1,000 half-formed plans. "He's always thought that," I replied, my voice flat, "that I'd just keep picking up the pieces, that I'd let it slide because he's family." "Not this time," Zoe said, her eyes narrowing. "Not this time." The next morning, I filed the police report. The officer at the station was a tired-looking woman in her late 40s, her hair pulled back into a tight, no-nonsense bun. She listened as I laid out the basics of my case, nodding occasionally, her pen scratching across a blank report form. "This isn't the first family fraud case I've seen," she said, glancing up at me over the rim of her reading glasses. "But it's one of the more extensive. You're doing the right thing by getting this on record." I nodded, the weight of my decision settling in my chest. This wasn't just a messy family fight. This was a crime, plain and simple, and I was done pretending it wasn't. I left the station feeling lighter, a strange, almost giddy sense of freedom washing over me. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was taking action. I was moving forward, one small, deliberate step at a time. That night, I sat down with Zoe, our laptops glowing in the darkness, and we drafted the first of many formal letters. Dispute notices, demand letters, cease and desist orders, each one a nail in the coffin of Jake's plans. And as I signed my name at the bottom of each letter, my pen pressing deep into the paper, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Power. Real undeniable power. Jake had tried to steal my future, but he had underestimated me. And by the time I was finished, he would regret every signature, every lie, every stolen dollar. I was done being the quiet, reliable sister I was, done cleaning up his messes. It was my turn to make a mess, and I was just getting started. A week passed, each day, pulling me deeper into the twisted web of my brother's deceit. I had filed the police report, frozen my credit, and started piecing together the paper trail that would prove my case. I knew I couldn't confront Jake until I had everything in place, but the waiting, the pretending, it ate at me. I was living a double life, one where I smiled through family group chats and liked his Instagram posts about hustle culture and entrepreneurial freedom while privately building the case that would tear his world apart. It was Zoe who finally broke the stalemate. We were sitting on my balcony, the early evening air cool against our faces as we watched the sun dip behind the city skyline. She took a long sip from her wine glass, her eyes never leaving the horizon. "You're going to have to confront him eventually," she said, her voice steady but edged with concern. "You can't just let him keep walking around like he's untouchable." I exhaled slowly, my breath fogging in the cool air. She was right. Of course, I had all the documents now. The forged signatures, the fraudulent applications, the trail of financial breadcrumbs that led straight to Jake's door. But I hadn't been able to pull the trigger. I don't know if I'm ready," I admitted, my fingers tightening around the stem of my glass. "Once I confront him, there's no going back. This will blow up our entire family." Zoe leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "Callie, he already blew it up. You're just lighting the match." Her words hit me like a slap, cold and sharp. She was right. Jake had made this mess. Not me, I was just refusing to be his silent victim. "All right," I said, setting my glass down with a determined clink. "Let's do this." The next day, I sent Jake a text, short, simple, to the point. "Hey, can you meet me at Mom and Dad's on Sunday? I need to talk to you." He replied within minutes. "Of course, everything okay?" I stared at his response, the casual, almost cheerful tone sparking a fresh wave of anger. How could he be so oblivious? So confident that his little sister would just roll over and accept his betrayal without a fight. "Yeah, just some family stuff. See you Sunday." The rest of the week crawled by, each day stretching into an endless loop of tension and tightly coiled nerves. I avoided the family group chat, ignored Jake's random memes and TikTok shares, and instead focused on tightening every piece of my case. I copied files, printed emails, and backed up every scrap of evidence onto a secure hard drive. When Sunday finally arrived, I drove to my parents' house in a fog of dread and simmering anger. The driveway was full, my mom's old Subaru, Dad's pickup, and Jake's shiny new Audi parked dead center, gleaming in the morning sun like a polished lie. I paused at the front door, my hand hovering over the worn brass handle. For a brief, cowardly moment, I considered turning around, driving back to my apartment and pretending this nightmare never happened. But then I remembered the mortgage statement, the forged signatures, the weight of a $47,000 debt hanging around my neck. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house smelled like Sunday. a blend of fresh coffee, bacon, and my mom's lavender-scented cleaning spray. Jake's laughter echoed from the kitchen, loud and carefree, mingling with the clatter of plates and the low hum of my father's baritone. I felt my stomach twist, a sick blend of nostalgia and betrayal churning in my gut. Jake looked up as I stepped into the kitchen, his face splitting into a wide, boyish grin. He reached over to pull me into a side hug, his arm heavy and warm around my shoulders. "Hey sis, long time no see," he said, his voice dripping with the same easy charm that had fooled me for years. I forced a tight smile slipping out of his grasp and moving to lean against the counter. My parents glanced over their faces, bright with the kind of uncomplicated warmth that only ignorance allows. "Hey, Callie," Mom said, her hands busy cracking eggs into a sizzling pan. "You want some breakfast? We're making all your favorites, bacon scrambled eggs and those hash browns you like." I shook my head, my mouth dry. "I'm good, I need to talk to Jake alone." The kitchen fell silent, the air thickening with an unspoken tension. Jake shot me a puzzled glance, his brow furrowing. "Sure," he said slowly, setting his mug down. "Let's head out back." I followed him through the sliding glass doors and onto the back porch. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves on the old oak tree rustling like whispered accusations. Jake leaned against the wooden railing. His arms crossed his face, the picture of relaxed curiosity. "So what's up?" he asked, his head tilting slightly, that same easy grin still fixed in place. I took a deep breath, my heart thudding like a war drum in my chest. This was it. "I know what you did," I said, my voice steady, the words slicing through the cool air like a blade. Jake's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my bag, pulling out the thick folder of evidence I had prepared. I dropped it onto the small, weathered table between us, the pages rustling like the leaves overhead. "This," I said, my voice low but firm. "Your mortgage, your debt, all of it in my name." He froze, his face paling as he stared down at the folder. For a moment, he looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, wide-eyed and breathless. "Callie?" He started, his voice thin and strained. "I can explain." "Don't..." I snapped my own voice, surprising me with its edge. "Don't you dare try to spin this. You stole my identity, Jake. You forged my name, tied me to $500,000 of debt, and never said a word. Do you have any idea what you've done?" For the first time, I saw real fear flicker across his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw working like he was chewing on broken glass. I felt my pulse slow, my anger solidifying into something cold and immovable. This was just the beginning. Jake stared at the thick folder on the table, his face a twisted mix of shock, fear, and poorly masked guilt. I watched as the gears turned in his mind, his eyes flicking between my clenched jaw and the stack of papers that held the proof of his betrayal. "Callie," he said, his voice cracking, "I can explain this. It's not what you think." I almost laughed at that, the absurdity of his words hitting me like a slap. Not what I think. I had spent weeks unraveling his lies, piecing together the financial jigsaw puzzle he had created behind my back. There was no mistake. Save it. I cut in my tone sharp enough to slice through the cool autumn air. "You forged my name, Jake. You used my credit, my trust, to secure a mortgage and a line of credit without my permission. Do you have any idea what you've done to my life?" He straightened his shoulders, tightening defensively, the old stubborn Jake surfacing. "Look, it's not like that," he said, his hands coming up as if he could physically push the truth away. I needed a way to secure the property. It was an investment, a smart one, and I didn't have the credit to do it myself." "So you stole mine?" I shot back, my voice rising. I took a step closer, the wood of the porch creaking beneath my feet. "You didn't even ask, Jake. You didn't give me a choice. You just decided my life, my financial future was yours to gamble with." He flinched, his jaw tightening, the color draining from his face. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of the old protective sympathy I used to feel for him, the little brother I had covered for, defended, and cleaned up after. But then I remembered the numbers, the years of debt he had dumped on my shoulders without a second thought. And that flicker of sympathy turned to cold, hard steel. I was going to pay it back, he stammered, his hands dropping to his sides, fingers flexing as if he might try to reach for the papers. Once the house sold, I was going to pay it back. I just needed a little time. A little time? I echoed the words sour in my mouth. Jake, you've buried me in nearly $500,000 of debt. You've tanked my credit, put my financial future at risk, and for what a property flip a gamble. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his eyes darting to the side as if looking for an escape. I felt a bitter satisfaction watching him squirm, his usual confidence crumbling under the weight of his own lies. Why didn't you just ask me? I continued, my voice dropping into a low, dangerous whisper. Why not come to me, your sister, and just ask for help? He met my eyes. Then his expression hardening, a flash of something like anger crossing his face. Because you would have said no! He spat, his voice trembling with a mix of shame and defiance. You always act like you're better than me, like you've got everything together, like I'm just this screw-up who can't do anything right. You wouldn't have helped me. You never do. I took a step back, the words hitting me like a physical blow. He actually believed that he had convinced himself that I was the villain in his story, the cold, unfeeling sister who wouldn't lift a finger to help him. That's not fair, I whispered, my throat tightening. I've helped you more times than I can count. I've co-signed loans, covered your car insurance, lent you money when you couldn't make rent. I've been there for you, Jake. But this is different. He looked away. His jaw set, the muscles in his neck twitching as he swallowed hard. I could see the wheels turning, the panic starting to creep into his eyes as the full weight of his actions settled over him. Callie, he said, his voice low and pleading now, his earlier anger fading into desperation. Please don't do this. We're family. We can work this out. Just give me a chance to fix this. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat, my fists clenching at my sides. Family? I repeated, my voice shaking. You used me, Jake. You took my trust, my name, and twisted it into a financial noose around my neck. That's not family. That's betrayal. He took a step forward, his hands outstretched, his eyes wide and pleading. Callie, please, I'll make this right. I promise. Just give me a chance. I felt my heart harden, the last traces of sibling loyalty turning to stone. I reached down, picked up the folder, and hugged it to my chest, the papers crinkling beneath my grip. You had your chance, I said, my voice flat and cold. You made your choice when you forged my name. Now you get to live with the consequences. I turned on my heel, my boots thudding against the wooden planks of the porch as I walked away. I felt his eyes on my back, the weight of his fear and regret hanging in the air between us like a storm cloud. As I reached the door, I paused, my hand on the glass, and glanced back over my shoulder. Jake stood frozen, his face pale, his hands shaking. Good luck, Jake, I said, my voice dripping with the cold satisfaction of long overdue justice. You're going to need it. I stepped back into the warmth of my parents' kitchen, the sound of my mother's laughter and my father's low hum of approval wrapping around me like a familiar, bittersweet blanket. But this time I felt no comfort. I had severed the last thread of trust that bound me to my brother, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. I drove home that afternoon in a haze, my mind replaying Jake's stunned, pleading face over and over. The small, scared boy I had once protected. The teenager I had covered for the brother I had trusted without question. He was gone, replaced by a man willing to sacrifice my future to save his own. I pulled into my apartment complex, the old cracked asphalt crunching under my tires, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, my fingers tight on the steering wheel. The autumn wind rustled through the bare branches above the sharp, cool air seeping in through the cracked window, cutting through the fog of my thoughts. Enough, I whispered to myself, the word hanging in the stillness. Enough. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, the weight of the past few weeks settling like lead in my bones. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the couch, my head falling back against the worn, familiar cushions. I reached for my laptop, the screen flickering to life with the last email I had opened a message from my lawyer confirming that my identity theft case had been formally filed. I scrolled through the text, the legal jargon blurring together my mind too numb to absorb it. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with Jake's name. I stared at it for a long moment, the bright, unassuming letters taunting me. He had called me 3 times on the drive home, left 2 voicemails, and sent a flurry of increasingly desperate texts. I had ignored them all. But this time I felt a strange, cold curiosity rise in me, a need to hear his voice, to feel the full weight of his panic. I swiped to answer, my heart steady. My anger tempered into something colder, sharper. "Callie," he blurted, his voice cracking with fear. "Please, you can't do this. You can't ruin my life over this. We're family." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Family," I echoed, leaning back against the couch, my fingers tightening around the phone. "You threw that word around a lot today, Jake, but I don't think you really understand what it means." He was silent for a moment, the line crackling with his ragged breathing. "I know I screwed up," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I know I messed up, okay, but I can fix this. I just need a little time." I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest flaring into something close to pity. How many times had I heard this before? How many second chances had I handed him only to watch him squander them without a second thought? "This isn't something you can just fix," I replied, my voice steady but cold. "You forged my name. Jake, you committed a crime. You buried me in $500,000 of debt without even asking, without even considering what that would do to my life. This isn't a mistake. It's a betrayal." He let out a choked sound, a mix of a sob and a bitter laugh. "I was desperate," he whispered. I thought I could make it work. I thought once the property sold, everything would be fine. I didn't think it would get this bad." "You didn't think—" I cut in, my anger flaring again, my fingers digging into the soft fabric of the couch. "That's the problem, Jake. You never think, you just take, and when it all falls apart, you expect me to pick up the pieces." He was silent, his breath hitching on the other end of the line, the weight of my words settling over him like a physical blow. "I can't help you this time," I said finally, my voice soft but unyielding. "I won't. You made this mess, and now you get to deal with the consequences." "Callie, please," he whispered, his voice so small, so broken, that for a moment I almost felt the old protective instinct flare up, the urge to shield him, to save him from himself. But then I remembered the bank statements, the forged documents, the months of lies and betrayal, and that flicker of sympathy snuffed out. "I hope you figure it out," I said, my tone flat final. "But I'm done being your safety net." I ended the call before he could respond, the silence in my apartment settling around me like a shroud. For a long moment, I just sat there, the phone still warm in my hand, my heart thudding in my chest. I felt hollow, drained like a candle burned down to the wick. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the anger and the betrayal, there was something else. Relief. I had drawn my line in the sand. I had chosen myself for the first time in years, and the weight of that choice felt like a breath of fresh, clean air in my lungs. I pushed myself off the couch, my legs unsteady, and walked to the window. Outside, the wind had picked up the leaves swirling in frantic circles across the parking lot, their bright, fiery colors a stark contrast to the gray sky. I watched them for a long time, my breath fogging the glass, my mind quiet. For the first time in weeks, I had lost something today. A brother, a sense of family, a piece of my past I would never get back, but I had gained something too. Freedom. And as I stood there, the cold autumn wind rattling the glass, I felt a slow, fierce smile spread across my face. Jake had underestimated me. He had thought I would fold, that I would forgive, that I would keep cleaning up his messes. But he was wrong. I was done being the backup plan, the safety net, the quiet, dependable sister who always said yes. From now on, I would be my own priority. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough story too for the holiday season. A mug that claimed I peaked in the womb was given to me. A new automobile was given to my sister. I grin as I thank them. On the way home, I then made one phone call. 3 days later, my parents were being questioned by police and my sister's automobile was gone. I wish I could claim that, when I opened it, I was taken aback. I wish I could say that the mug surprised me, that I searched about for the true present after laughing politely. However, no, I saw the blocky lettering as soon as I pulled aside the wrapping paper. I had a look into the womb. My stomach gave a small nod, saying, "Yep, that tracks." Like I was on some low-budget game show called Guess Who's Still the Family Punchline. I held it out for everyone to see. My mother laughed. My father grinned with pride. "You've always been that theatrical," my sister Kaylee observed, tilting her head, provided an explanation. I gave a silent smile. "The sort that is socially acceptable in family pictures and hostage situations. Not the kind that reaches your eyeballs." Kaylee then unwrapped her present. When the camera pans up to a string quartet in a movie, do you remember how everything goes? Slow-mo and sparkles. This was it. However, it was my parents giving Kaylee a pair of vehicle keys wrapped up in a red satin bow rather than a passionate proposal or a soldier coming home. As if she hadn't known previously, she cried, "Oh my God," as if this hadn't been practiced or if they hadn't previously hinted at the major surprises on Facebook. She squealed as she hurried outdoors in her little heeled heels, saying, "No way, no way, no way." I repeatedly trailed behind. I didn't want to see the automobile. I wanted to be sure I wasn't having hallucinations, and there was anything new, even though I already knew it would be ridiculously impossible. The dealer tax was still in effect, silver glossy and sleek. I believe it was an Audi, but I can't be certain since the ridiculousness of it caused me to momentarily lose consciousness. Mom put her hand on my arm and murmured, "She needs something safe for job interviews." As if I ought to be proud. As if I ought to be thankful. You mean this made sense because Kaylee was suddenly the face of job development after quitting 2 internships in 3 months due to their premature nature. Everyone was raving over the automobile, so I looked down at my cup once more, still in my hand, still real inside over cinnamon buns and mimosas that I had cooked. Dad mentioned making investments for the future. Kaylee might finally stop using her car and damaging the bumper. Mom joked Kaylee shed a tear or two, said that they were the world's greatest parents. I said nothing at all, I just took a taste of my coffee. Irony was the flavor of the cup. After a while, I bid everyone farewell, gave them hugs, grinned cooperatively, and expressed my gratitude for the wonderful holiday. No scene, no snark. Simply be silent. By the time I arrived at my car, it was snowing. My real vehicle, the one I purchased for you 6 years prior. The one I spent the most of my 20s making depressing lentil soup and foregoing holidays to pay off. I started the engine, waited for it to warm up, and then sat there for a minute, watching the snow move in sluggish, mushy streaks down the windshield. My phone then buzzed. I initially believed Kaylee was simply tagging me in something offensive. However, it was a warning against bank fraud. At Elite Auto Center, a $23.68 transaction was made to your account. My gaze shifted from the TV to the snow and back again. The name of the dealership, I didn't need to look it up on Google. I was aware that Kaylee's automobile originated there. The framing of the license plate reminded me of it. Elite Auto Center Silver Audi, $23,000. My mouth became parched. I examined the card after opening my banking app. Not my primary one, not the same one I use for petrol and groceries. The other one I gave my parents access to the just-in-case card years ago, so they would have peace of mind in case of emergency. Because what if something happened and they needed help? My mother said Kaylee apparently qualified as an emergency because she had to look professional for her interview at pricey juice bars. Not even my heart raced. The strange thing was that I didn't perform a U-turn and barge back into their living room, nor did I yell or weep. They handed me a drink while I sat there staring at the $23,000 for a car that I had purchased with my card. As the snow turned the scene into a gentle, muted haze, I drove home in solitude. I stopped at a gas station somewhere between miles 7 and 12, turned off the engine, blocked them from accessing my bank account, froze the card, logged out of all joint payment portals, and stopped the monthly transfer I had been making to them to help with the mortgage for the previous 2.5 years. I was never asked to pay for it. They just stated that things were tight. Technically, I proposed after Dad's operation. They agreed to it. They always do. I didn't give them a call. What should I have said? When the dealership calls, I want to know why you gave my sister's car and me a joke after committing credit card fraud. When the next mortgage payment fails, let them be perplexed. Let them ponder. I phoned one number and checked my messages. Not Dad, not Mom, not Kaylee, fraudulent services. Hello? When someone replied, I said an unlawful charge has to be reported. It wasn't until the cup fell from my lap and onto the car's floor that I realized I was still holding it. It remained intact. Naturally, it didn't. That kind of thing never breaks when it should. I was awake earlier than the sun the next morning, despite the fact that I had hardly slept. The cup remained perched on the counter as if it desired recognition. I kept my hands off of it. I just stood there for a long, thinking how many times you have to be deceived before the pain ultimately goes away, while I watched the snow fall sideways outside my window. When I reopened my banking app, I thought perhaps there had been an accounting error, but there was no USD 23,648 from Elite Auto Center. As clear as day, bold typeface. I'm not sorry. I drank from my broken green cup, which I had obtained during a college campus fundraiser. It's mine, even though it's ugly, malformed, and has a fractured handle. I used my tip money from working 2 shifts to pay for it. I haven't lost anything because of it. I couldn't stop thinking about how many times I had aided them. Quiet stuff, things they always anticipated but never explicitly asked for. For example, following Dad's surgery, Mom suggested that the mortgage was getting tight. I volunteered to assist. Only if it's not too much trouble, she said. However, after it established a pattern of paying $600 on time each month like clockwork, they never instructed me to stop. I also previously paid Kelly's parking fines. Back then, she still owned her old automobile, which she neglected until it broke down entirely. When her registration was flagged, she sobbed because she had forgotten about the tickets, said that it was destroying her life. At 2 a.m., I made my online payment and received no gratitude at all. A week later, a Venmo request was made for nails prior to the interview. I considered giving them a call and giving them a 24-hour window to return the automobile, but I knew precisely how it would work out. Mom would cry, "Let's all relax." Dad would remark in a neutral tone. Kaylee would simultaneously act perplexed and outraged. Thank you, but no. Rather, I dressed, picked up my coat, and went behind the wheel. As usual, their house had the same appearance. Half-lit fake reindeer on the grass and beige siding. After parking across the street, I waited for the engine to cool off before getting out. My hands remained still, but I felt a stinging sensation in my chest. Mom, dressed in her Christmas robe, opened the door. Oh, she blinked. Sabrina, I didn't anticipate it, I responded. I know you used my credit card. As simple as that. No idle chatter, no hugs, just the facts directly between the eyes. After becoming pale for a moment, she grinned as if I had messed up my line and we were performing in a play together. Enter. The temperature is icy, still smelling of gingerbread and pine. I entered the living room. The floor was littered with pieces of wrapping paper. Kelly's automobile keys bow was affixed to the fireplace's side. Like any other morning, Dad was reading the paper while lounging on the couch. Is everything all right? Without looking up, he asked. He bought Kelly a vehicle using my emergency card. $23,000, I said. He was interested in that. He glanced at his mother, who gave him a "I got this" expression before turning back to face me. She began, "Well, honey," and I swear to God that I might have thrown the mug through their bay window if she had said it wasn't what it appeared to be. Kaylee needed a trustworthy interview tool badly. The bus system here is terrible, as you are aware. Dad flinched when I laughed so loudly. Is that how you explain it? Because Kaylee dislikes public transit? You stole from me. It isn't theft. Dad raised a hand and said, You allowed us to use that card in case of an emergency. I lost my temper. Not for high-end sedans. Avoid being dramatic. You make good money, Mom said. We didn't anticipate it being a significant event. You didn't think spending $23,000 of my money would be a huge deal. A pause occurred. Everyone wants to say something during that awkward family pause, but no one wants to speak first. Naturally, the show's star then appeared. Kaylee entered, with her phone in one hand and a giant iced coffee in the other. She wore fuzzy slippers and a full makeup face. What's going on? She looked at me as if I had a warrant and asked, The car is causing her distress, Mom said quietly. I heard Kaylee roll her eyes so forcefully, Sabrina. Oh my God, really? You're upset over that. You live alone and earn 6 figures. You don't seem to be in pain, I said. You used my card without my consent. We call that fraud, she chuckled. You're so uptight. This is exactly why you're still single. You act like money is love or something. I turned to my parents. You can return the car today or pay me back in full. Otherwise, I'm filing a police report. Mom looked horrified. You'd do that to us over a car. Dad looked tired, older than he did yesterday. It's Christmas, Mom whispered, like the date was a shield against accountability. You didn't even give me a real gift, I said. He handed me a joke, then used my money to give her a car. I waited. No one spoke. Then I said it. The card is already frozen. The bank is aware, and I've canceled the monthly transfers. You'll need to figure out the mortgage on your own. That one hit Mom gasped, like I'd slapped her. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm just finally choosing myself. I walked out before anyone could cry or yell or throw out some sentimental line about family. I'd heard them all before. Family means sacrifice. Family comes first. Family is everything. What they never said, but always meant was, family is everything until it inconveniences Kaylee. I didn't slam the door. I didn't owe them that much energy when I got back in my car. I sat for a minute with my hands on the steering wheel. It buzzed on my phone. New message from the bank, fraud report confirmation. I smiled. It wasn't a joyful smile, but it was real. Turns out I didn't peak in the womb. I just hadn't started climbing yet. I didn't expect to feel better, but I did. Not joyous, just steady. After all that transpired at their residence, there wasn't much left to say. There was just what was to be done. I sat down with a cup of coffee and unlocked my phone. I scrolled back through past texts until I located the one I'd written to my mom 3 years ago. When I gave her the emergency credit card, it was simple. Just to be clear, the emergency card is for medical or house stuff exclusively. Please don't use it for anything else. I took a screenshot. Then I downloaded the credit card statement, the one with the $23,648 charge to Elite Auto Center, and preserved the photo of Kaylee standing in front of the silver automobile with a red bow. I'd stolen it at Christmas without thinking. Now it was evidence. I phoned the local police department's non-emergency number and inquired how to report financial theft. I was moved to an officer by a lady. I calmly and clearly explained that I hadn't approved the transaction and that I had only given my parents a credit card for emergencies, that I had paperwork and proof in writing. He wanted to know if I would mail it. Yes, I replied. He provided me with an email address and a report number. That afternoon, I submitted everything. Just the facts. No drama or shouting. I had no intention of hurting them. I ultimately made the decision to quit acting as though they hadn't crossed a boundary, which is why I was doing it. The repercussions started 3 days later. Kaylee's text message was the first indication, "You're amazing." She uploaded a video to her social media accounts a few hours later. She was having her car pulled out of the driveway, which was technically the one for which I had been penalized. She remained silent. The description said just filmed it and stared into the camera like someone had robbed her. Some individuals find it unbearable to see you advance. He included me in it. I closed the app after watching it once I received a private message later that day. We had met a few of times. One of Kaylee's former classmates from high school. She said that Kaylee has a lengthy history of exploiting people and that she wasn't shocked. Although it wasn't intended to be consoling, I valued the candor. My mother left me a voicemail the next morning. She sounded tremulous. Today the cops were at the door. They said that we were the subject of a fraud report. How could you, Sabrina? This family is being torn apart by you. We're not like this. The message was not saved by me. Later that afternoon, my father texted me briefly. This has gotten out of hand. We must speak. I also didn't answer that. The extended family began to weigh in by the evening. First, my Aunt Diane sent out a group message. Mother, did you really contact the cops by yourself? I answered in a single sentence. Without my consent, she used my credit card. I filed a report. After that, nobody said anything. There was no surprise in the quiet. Simply said it was louder than normal. As the days went by, Kaylee's situation also began to fall apart. In January, she had intended to begin a new internship, something that was planned for her by one of Dad's pals. She couldn't get there without a car. They dropped her after she skipped the first few days. I was envious, resentful, and harsh, but she claimed online that I had destroyed her life. She didn't mention that she used my money without asking. My former bank sent me a notice in the interim. Logging into the shared mortgage portal had been attempted. He had already shut down my mother. All she would have noticed would have been a login problem. A link to the listing was sent to me a few weeks later. The owner of their home put it up for sale. They used their phones to snap the dimly lit pictures. I knew it was the same living room where they offered me a mug and gave Kaylee the vehicle keys. I clicked on each image. I was not arrogant. It didn't satisfy me. I was satisfied. I've finished explaining. I've given up trying. Being helpful just when it was convenient is over. Since the SMS and voicemail, I hadn't heard from them. No excuses, no justifications. Simply be silent. The charge was dropped a few days after the report was submitted. The card company promptly reimbursed the whole amount once the dealership towed the vehicle. There's no need to apologize. That evening, while drinking coffee on my couch, I launched my banking app. Everything was in its proper place. There is nothing lacking. Nothing was abused, everything. Mine once more. I remembered Christmas. When Kaylee squealed over the car, they grinned. They appeared so proud, as if they had done something kind and affectionate. I wonder whether their sense of pride has diminished. The cup remained in the garbage. I hadn't even bothered to remove it. It was no longer necessary for me. They disregarded the regulations. I recently formally announced it. There was silence for several weeks. No guilt-tripped voicemails, no texts, no calls. Nothing but quiet. As if they hoped that if enough time went by, I would forget that anything had happened. After all that had been the beat for years, some quiet freeze, some tiny fire. After that, everything was reset as if nothing had ever burned. However, that was not the case here. The silence finally broke. My mother texted me to start it. Can we have a conversation? Me and you alone. Similar to adults. I debated whether to ignore it for a minute as I stared at it. I wanted to look her in the eye, though I was curious to know what justification they had ultimately decided on. I thus concurred. An hour neutral ground location. We got together in a cafe close to my flat. Not the type of place they usually go. No booths, no menus, dripping with syrup, black coffee, spotless tables, and insufficient privacy to cause a commotion, which is most likely why she selected it. She was the first to arrive. By yourself? No. Kaylee, Dad was in the car. Too tired to come in, she said. Yes. He gave me a hug. I didn't return the hug. She seems unsurprised. We took a seat. As I sipped my coffee and waited for the play to begin, she tinkled with her wedding band. I've had time to reflect. I said, She said almost anything. I gave a nod, didn't assist her, didn't sense the quiet. With a tight smile, she jumped right in. Sabrina, we were under pressure. Your dad has been under stress. Kaylee has gone missing. We had no intention of hurting you. Obviously not. They never want to do harm to others. This keeps happening, I simply think. She went on. You're doing so well now. You've been accountable all along. I hoped you would comprehend. There was the guilt trip veiled in compliments I could afford to be taken advantage of, but they couldn't afford to be good. And now, she said, her voice lowered, it's taking longer than we anticipated to sell the house. A few things are behind us, like a chess player attempting to read the board. She gave me a close look. I would appreciate it if you could assist with the mortgage for a few more months till things settle down. I took a seat. Makeup. No. Her smile wavered. I didn't complete. You didn't have to. She blinked. Will you actually allow your parents to lose their house? I leaned forward, clear and a little at ease. I responded, you took advantage of me like a bank. Banks have conditions. You damaged them that touched down. She blinked once more slowly. This time, we were in dire straits. No, you were entitled, I responded. There is a distinction. She slumped back, appearing smaller now, not frail, but simply deflated, as if the act had finally lost its breath. She said she hoped time would cure things as the conversation came to an end. A few minutes later, I didn't disagree. I just didn't specify whose time she was referring to. The same silence that had accompanied me all year followed me home. However, it wasn't hefty this time. It was spotless, like a recently mopped floor. My cousin sent me a snapshot of a group conversation 2 days later. I didn't participate. Sabrina's actions in phoning the police are abhorrent. There was a miscommunication. And now, after making a mistake, our parents are fighting for their lives. That, then, was the new story. Not deception, not pilfering. Just a small whoopsie with a fancy car. I didn't respond. I just sent my cousin the message along with the credit card bill and 3 attachments. The card's parameters were outlined in a text message I sent years ago. Police confirmed the report. That was it. No explanation. No caption. I never heard from her again. A few days later, Kaylee appeared on the internet, fresh images and captions. The tone had changed. Now it was all ambiguous quotations about family and treachery. Only when you're helpful does that assist. Yes, I didn't even bother to answer. I no longer wanted to influence anyone's opinion. Either the important people would know or they wouldn't. In any case, I wasn't responsible for fixing it. The house did eventually sell, enough to avoid foreclosure, but probably not for what they wanted. I got the listing link from someone. I didn't press the button. I didn't have to see my early years reduced to potential and square footage. They relocated to a smaller location across town. Mom sent me an email to update her address in case anything changed, so I know I didn't respond. I wasn't upset. I wasn't resentful. I had just finished. I tidied up the kitchen drawer one morning, which contains random items like old birthday cards, takeout menus, and keys to items I no longer possess. The folded-up credit card bill from December was in the very back. As a last step, I carefully and thoroughly tore it up. They used to claim that I didn't need as much because I was the stronger one. I could handle it. They were saying that you're more easily ignored. I learned to remain silent from them. As it happens, I was simply waiting for the appropriate opportunity to speak. You are now aware of what transpired. I went too far, according to some. I didn't go far enough, according to others. I didn't cause any trouble. I refrained from screaming. I didn't burn bridges or bang doors. I only set the limits. They didn't believe I could draw. However, what are your thoughts? Was it incorrect of me to report the scam to the police? To leave? Or was that the first time in a long time that I did anything right? Anyway, I appreciate you listening. In addition, if you're interested in hearing more tales like this one, sincere, untidy, and human, feel free to subscribe. Story 3. My sister's graduation was attended by my family band. Don't even make an effort to come? My mother stated as much, like icy glass. Her voice pierced the shaky Zoom connection. There was no hesitancy, no prelude. That is as though I were an unexpected visitor to someone else's life. The call was intended to be straightforward on a Sunday morning. Still wearing my robe and with coffee in hand, I had logged on from my kitchen. My chest constricted as the golden, warm sunshine seeped through the shutters behind me as soon as I heard her voice. She went on to say, "It's not about you," as though that clarified everything. Chloe is entitled to a day free from interruptions. I was that person. My father was hardly visible in his Zoom window, scrolling through his phone on silent while my mother was straight and focused in her chair as I gazed at the screen with our family's faces arranged in tiny squares. Paige, my cousin, without her camera. Then in the middle, shot is my younger sister Chloe, who has a gentle grin and soft hair that are just right. She remained silent. She was not required to. Her words were not as loud as her silence. As I set the cup down on the counter, I could feel the heat rising in my face. My throat caught as I opened my mouth to speak. All I could do was a slow, steady, "This is how I find out after all of my actions." My mom laughed. "Rachel, we're not going to do this. Chloe is graduating. It is a festivity, not whatever this is, whatever it is." This is the thing where I covered Chloe's 4 years of tuition. I said, I sent her money for accommodation and textbooks because of this. When she refused to use university resources, she even sought the help of a therapist. This is when you all grinned as I made the payment. I'm an embarrassment now. I was not interrupted. Nobody protested, not even my dad. After a single blink, my Aunt Anne glanced down. Chloe continued to smile. I was too familiar with that type of smile. The type that declares victory. I realized then that it wasn't an error. This was not a spontaneous outburst. A decision was made, coordinated, agreed upon. Even I may have inquired as to why my hand went to the keyboard when I might have pleaded for mercy or an explanation. Be calm, mechanical. I launched the banking app. I hadn't used since establishing Chloe's 3-year-old automatic tuition plan. The dashboard took a while to load. I didn't shake my fingers. Press the cancel button. Verify completed. "Oh," my voice said, "I will never give you my money again, even if that is how you feel," as if I had just said something in a strange tongue. My mother narrowed her eyes. "I mean it. I included grocery money, tuition, credit cards, and everything else. You are an adult. It's time to behave accordingly." I clicked leave without waiting for a response getting together. The screen turned dark. It buzzed on my phone. My dad sent me a text 5 seconds later. "Avoid making any foolish decisions. She's your sister." Then Chloe. "I appreciate you making everything about you once again." On the counter, I flipped the phone over. My mug's coffee was now cold. After pouring it down the drain, I stood there inhaling while holding on to the sink's edge. I didn't shake my hand. No more. I was funding, not family. I wish I could claim that everything fell apart during that Zoom call. In actuality, though, it wasn't a break, there was a conclusion. Years before that, the breakdown had begun, slowly, quietly, the way the drywall collapses due to a leak behind the wall. It isn't visible to you. One day you just wake up and discover that everything you've made is fundamentally flawed. A phone call was the first step. At the age of 24, I had just begun my first full-time job at a fintech firm as an entry-level employee. I was excited to have health insurance and a kitchen with a functional dishwasher. "Hello, dear." Her voice was syrupy, according to Mom. When she wanted anything, that was the only tone she used. "We're quite pleased with you." "Really? Oh, and the bill for Chloe's tuition arrived." "Only until we work things out." "Could you help pay for it?" I said. "Yes, of course. That only lasted till each semester." Housing comes next, followed by books, groceries, and Miami mental health weekends. Chloe didn't ask outright. She was not required to. The requests were received. The words, "You make more than us," or "She's the one with real potential," are tucked in by parents. "You ought to be proud, Rachel." Feeling proud. I spoke that word over and over again as if it may finally taste good. They referred to me as the sister with it all together, accomplished and independent. I was the one who didn't need anything, of course. In other words, they didn't care about me. I was the answer for them. I was always the solution to every emergency. I paid the rent for the previous month when Chloe's laptop broke and she decided to relocate off campus because the dormitories were so dreary. After her boyfriend wrecked her car, I changed it. I told myself it was love, even though I assisted with the deductible that perhaps they would see me at last if I gave enough. As family, not just a wallet. However, they didn't. Little bruises were indicators that I disregarded. I made jokes about how Chloe wrinkled her nose when I gave her a MacBook Air. On Christmas, I requested the expert. "This one is rather simple." Dad chuckled. Next year, perhaps Mom remained silent. Or the occasion when I glimpsed a text message she sent to Aunt Janet while she had her phone unlocked on the table. What a control freak Rachel is. Because she writes the checks, you might assume she's Jeff Bezos. But why complain if she's stupid enough to continue paying? I read it 3 times. It didn't mean what it meant, I told myself. The line I couldn't rewrite came later, but I was skilled at rewriting their scripts. It was almost midnight on a wet Thursday night. My phone rang just after I got into bed. "We're calling to verify some unusual activity on a card ending in 7 to 8, said the man on the line, Miss Morgan. I blinked. I haven't used that card for any of the $3,700 in transactions over the past 48 hours. Cartier Balenciaga Footlocker. Years ago, I temporarily gave that card to my mother for groceries. I ended the call. My heart wasn't pounding. It sank that night. I didn't call them. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, sat at my desk, and switched on the soft light. I went through every account, every forgotten card, every auto pay. 3 of them were active, all tied to my name, my social security number, my credit, and their spending. I started making a spreadsheet. Not for revenge, for clarity, for proof. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew I had never been a daughter. I had only been the line of credit they could still dial into. I didn't call them. I cleaned the mess. I spent the next 2 days in silence. Not the kind you sit in, but the kind you build like a barrier. It was the first time I treated what had happened. Not as a betrayal to be mourned, but as a crisis to be resolved. I printed statements, opened spreadsheets, changed passwords I hadn't touched in years, called the banks one by one. "Can you confirm who authorized this card?" "Not me. That's my name, but not my purchases." They were polite, efficient. Some asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, not yet. I wasn't ready to burn the bridge, but I was ready to shut it down. One card, then another, then a third. All closed. I turned off the grocery stipend I'd set up through my budgeting app. I canceled the tuition autopay. I submitted paperwork to remove Chloe's access to the Amazon account she'd been using under my login. Every click felt like peeling tape from my skin. It hurt less than I expected. There was a moment, maybe halfway through, when I paused. The apartment was still. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I looked up at the bookshelf by the window where a single potted cactus sat. Small, spiky, resilient. I had bought it at a gas station 3 months earlier, half as a joke. Now it stared back like a mirror. I stood up, walked over, and placed a sticky note on the pot. In block letters, I wrote boundaries. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I boiled water for tea, I folded the laundry. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I let go of the version of me who kept waiting to be thanked. It wasn't sadness I felt. Not anger either. It was something quieter, like finally standing up in a room where you'd been kneeling for years. The texts kept coming from Mom. "Can we just talk?" from Chloe. "Did the payment not go through? Just fix it, Rachel." from Dad. Vaguely. Let's not do something we can't undo. I read them all. I didn't reply. Instead, I dug out the file I'd originally produced for Chloe's FAFSA submissions. It still had my W-2s, my co-signer documents, even copies of her student ID. I placed everything into a new folder named Closed. I zipped it, archived it. I wasn't attempting to punish them. That was the part folks didn't grasp. I didn't want them to suffer. I simply wanted them to finally live without me, without my identity, my number, my safety net. I wanted them to know what it felt like to stand on a floor they constructed themselves. I ordered in a day on the couch that evening, turned down the volume, and watched an old black and white film. The city outside glistened like I hadn't seen it in years. Just once, I said aloud to myself as I cuddled up under a blanket, "Your serenity is not due to them." Although saying that seemed odd, it wasn't incorrect. The family Zoom was called. I brought receipts with me. It was 3 weeks later. No excuses. No phone calls. Nothing but quiet, deliberate and incisive. Next, a message clipped from my mother. Short family Zoom. 7 p.m. tomorrow. Immediate, no background, no warmth. The ideal invitation. It was not a query. I spent a long minute looking at the words. I nearly blocked her number and erased it. But there's a quiet side to me. I didn't say anything because the part of me that used to hope still wanted to see their expressions when I didn't wince. I arrived at precisely 700 p.m. The screen came to light with a flicker. The faces and the boxes are the same, as if nothing had altered. Chloe showed up first. Her lashes done and her hair curled, a casual afterthought of a hoodie slung over her shoulders. She took a sip from a Starbucks cup that was perfectly placed to display her engagement ring. A moment later, Mom arrived, sitting upright like a newscaster in her silk robe. With the ceiling fan gently rotating over his head, Dad's square was dark. He had his eyes off the camera. He didn't. Let's get started. Mom has passed away. No salutations. 2 weeks remain till Chloe's graduation. The stage is being walked by her. It would be a shame if you weren't there. I remained still. I was instructed not to come by you. I was angry, she said. No, Chloe cut in. I meant it when I said it. You shouldn't be there. She pursed her lips, crossed her arms, and leaned back. She kept that specific behavior only for family members and store employees, which she felt was awkward. I still need the last payment for my capstone course, she noted. Until it clears, they won't let me go. It was there, the true cause of the call. Not repair, not remorse. One final request. I rested my elbows on the desk and leaned forward a little. I said, "Let me clarify this. You want my money, but you don't want me at graduation?" Chloe gave an eye roll. "It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with my college graduation. I paid for the college." My voice was flat as I spoke. Every ride, every book, every semester, every apartment with the Instagram lighting and hardwood flooring. You posted a constant grind for each oat milk latte. That's sufficient. Mom lost her temper. Calmly, I gazed at her. Still, you said I was an embarrassment and a distraction. I didn't belong, you said. She turned her head away. At last, Dad unmuted. This should not be exaggerated. I chuckled a little. It wasn't nice. This is appropriate. I see, I said. I'm going to be really straightforward about it. Actually, I grabbed my mouse. Share the screen with a single click. On my desktop, a folder opened. The book is called Simple Receipts. There were PDFs within statements from credit cards, screenshots of Uber expenses, receipts from Sephora connected to Chloe's account, and a single file with the label MP3 audio recording. Mom became pale. Chloe stopped. Play wasn't pressed by me. Not quite yet. I simply stated that I wasn't here to argue, You took exactly what I came to remind you of. There is no drama here. This is theft. The folder glowed dimly in my apartment's low light as it sat open on the screen. I allowed the quiet to linger long enough for uneasiness to creep in. Mom was the first to speak. Her voice was brittle and clipped. Did you record us? I took a while to respond. That was the question I wanted them to sit in. Instead, I said, you took what wasn't yours and you laughed as you did it. Chloe scoffingly interrupted Rachel. This is so trivial. Really, it seems like you're in court while you create a slideshow. I clicked on one of the highlighted items in the PDF and saw that it was for a ride-sharing charge at 2 in the morning and a sushi meal at Aritzia Wonder at 80 from a club that I had never visited. Everything is connected to Chloe's email and comes from the grocery card I gave my mother 5 years ago. Her Apple ID. Chloe said, you always act like you're better than us. Just because you live in that dreary tiny flat and have some dumb job. You're right, I answered in a composed tone. I do believe that I am superior to others that attempt to play the victim after stealing from their own family. She closed her mouth. Dad let out a sigh. All okay, all right. Come on, this is family, even though we've made some errors. This is deception, I said. I then hit the play button. The first speakerphone crackled in the recording. The voices were distinct despite the poor quality Chloe. No, she won't say no. She never does. She won't even notice, Mom. Simply don't go above $3,000 or the bank will call. Then there was laughing, the type that erupts when you believe no one is paying attention. Then Mom, once more. We might as well take advantage of her till she gets married and loses interest. The recording was over. Nobody made a move. Mom appeared to have been smacked. Chloe gazed down at the ground. Dad scratched his temples as if the moment's weight were too much for him to handle. You kept everything. Mom said. I gave a nod. I held on to it. Knowing that I didn't want to believe it, I said, at last, Chloe was able to speak. This is something you'll regret. She gave a hiss. Everything will be ruined by you. My job hunt and graduation, I interrupted her. It was damaged by you. I said, you handled it like a convenience shop, stealing my name, my credit, and my trust. And you gave me a call when I requested for a thank you dramatic. Mom's voice broke. The entire family is being blown up by you. Through the webcam, I gazed at her. No, that's what you did when you decided that my money was more important than me. She made another attempt, now softer. We still consider you our daughter. This is something we can resolve. My eyes did not meet mine when I smiled. Fixing me is not my purpose. I am here to finish. I leaned back in my chair and ended the screen share. This is what will take place. The way I would say it in a budget meeting. I said I refuse to pay the remaining amount. I will not be attending the graduation. I've canceled all of my accounts, including Netflix tuition and rent, Amazon Prime, and Spotify. Lost, yes. I added that the cards had been reported as stolen when I raised my phone to the camera. I haven't filed charges because I still have the dignity to spare Chloe's career before it even begins. That was less noble than it sounded, but it was true. All I wanted to do was get out without burning anything else. Chloe started to say something, but stopped. She twisted her face. Anger, shame, incredulity. She was unable to choose a mask. Mom gave a sharp blink. This is what you're actually doing, I said. I already did. Then this time I didn't wait for the screen to darken before clicking, leave meeting. Her graduation wasn't ruined by me. I stopped being involved in the deception. There wasn't a sudden quiet following the Zoom call. Slowly, like fog moving across a field you believed you knew. It came, there was no word for 3 days. No missed calls, no messages, not a single one of Dad's ambivalent just checking the mails. In years, for the first time, there was silence on my phone. I wasn't sure if that should have been calming or frightening. However, the storm came just as I had anticipated on the 4th day. First came my mom's email. The heading, "You're being unkind." She accused me of betraying her, embarrassing the family, and ruining Chloe's future over a trivial grievance in lines that sounded like sermons. The line that I like the most. Before the world poisoned you with independence, you were a nice daughter. The cousins, aunts, and a few uncles I hardly knew from previous holidays arrived after I failed to reply. They all used the same script while sending messages. She's your sister. It's only financial. Your handling of this disappointed us. When I paid Chloe's rent, I didn't receive any messages from any of them. No one expressed gratitude when I paid for my parents' groceries during lockdown or maintained the mortgage. All of them instantly had views. Though I moved into a new apartment a few blocks away in the same city after discreetly packing my old one, it featured white walls, hardwood floors, and a long window ledge that the sun reached every morning. A tall, leafy green plant that leaned toward the light was the new plant I purchased. I gave it a sufficient name without requesting permission. I simply responded to a text message from an unidentified number. But before I ever saw the name, I knew the tone. The deadline was missed by me. I am unable to walk at this time. Everything was damaged by you. Chloe was the one. No salutations, no recognition, simply assign responsibility. I gazed at the television as usual, hovering the thumb, then responding. Nothing was ruined by me. I just quit giving you money for your fantasy. I blacklisted the number after that. My alma mater contacted a week later to re-enable the tuition plan someone had tried to pass for me. They had used a scanned form to fake my signature. It looks like Chloe took something from an old file. It was noted. They sought to confirm who I was. Of course I did. I sat in my car and laughed more than I had in months after thanking the woman on the phone. It was absurd, frantic, predictable, and ultimately finished not because it was hilarious. I came upon images on social media 2 months later. At her own graduation ceremony, Chloe sat in the audience wearing a lot of makeup and seeming indifferent. My aunt's picture included the following caption: "We are proud of Chloe. To us, she is a graduate. Yes, even if she was let down by the system, or perhaps it just ceased allowing her to cheat at last." My father's arrival at my new building that afternoon was the last time I heard from anyone in my family. He appeared slimmer. He spoke more softly. He said, "I just want to talk." So I opened the door for him. He was standing close to the window. His hands were in his pockets as he looked about the room as if he was trying to figure out what had changed about me. He remained silent for a while. "Now it's quiet," he murmured at last. "Chloe isn't doing too well. It's not as good as your mother makes it seem." He paused. "Would you be able to return for a supper alone, only to converse?" I gave a head shake. "For years, I spoke, but you just ignored me." They would now have to endure quiet.